argument started among the disciples as to which of them would be the greatest. Jesus, knowing their thoughts, took a little child and had him stand beside him. Then he said to them, "Whoever welcomes this little child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. For it is the one who is least among you all who is the greatest." "Master," said John, "we saw someone driving out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because he is not one of us."
"Do not stop him," Jesus said, "for whoever is not against you is for you." As the time approached for him to be taken up to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem, and he sent messengers on ahead who went into a Samaritan village to get things ready for him. But the people there did not welcome him because he was heading for Jerusalem. When the disciples James and John saw this, they asked, "Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven to destroy him?" But Jesus turned and rebuked them, and then he and his disciples went to another village.
Okay, thank you guys so much for that. Hey, I know we just had the, yeah, why not? That's awesome. I know we just had, the trick-or-treat event just came and went, but I want to show you what I consider truly one of the most frightening images you'll ever be able to see in your lifetime, right there. There's few pictures that concern me quite as much as this one here. But even though it is a frightening image and one we never want to see, really, when you think about it, when that image pops up on the dash of your car, it is meant to inform you of something. It's meant to warn you that something is not as it ought to be. Something is wrong. And because of that, it's given you an opportunity to rectify it, to cause a solution in your life. Sometimes you know right away, don't you, when you get that light on? Because for a while, the car's been driving a little funny. It's been making those wonky noises. It's been doing the vibration. You know, even if you don't know about cars, you know that there's something wrong. But many times I have found that when this light comes on my dash, the realities are not so obvious, are they, right? Car seems to be going fine, and everything on the external, on the surface, looks good, but when the symbol comes on, it does tell me that something underneath of the hood is not as it ought to be. And as inconveniencing as it might be, when it is presented to you, it's meant to tell you that not only is something is off, but you need to now move to address that. I've shared this before, but when my wife and I were newly married, we started in our first job, we had to get a car. We had to move from New Brunswick to Indianapolis. And we didn't have a vehicle to our name, and we had very little money to our name, as many newlyweds do. So we went and we found a used 1995 Dodge Neon, a vehicle that's well known for its reliability. About 6 months into that into owning that car, this light popped on the dash. Rachel was concerned. She said, "Chris, should we go get that looked at?" I told her, yes, eventually, but it's, we have some time to work with. I had it in my brain that once these lights came on, it was like the first warning, like, hey, kind of like when you look in the mirror and you're just starting to go out of shape and you just get that first image of first warning. You know you need to eventually rectify it, but right now things are okay. Just, eventually get to it. So I tell her, we'll get to it eventually. She said, "Chris, can I please put it into your hands to take care of?" And I said, "Yes, I will." 2 months later, we're driving on the highway. We're headed to a friend's house in the middle of February. It's wintertime, obviously, and our car breaks down. In fact, we see smoke coming out of the hood. We pull off to the side. Someone rescued us, but I knew right away, and I was praying, "Lord, please say this is something that we can easily fix." But as well as I do, a vehicle that old and that brand, and with us going that long after not addressing the issue, it was done, and it was done permanently. The sad part of this story is that it didn't necessarily have to be that reality. You see, if I had simply paused and addressed the problem when the warning light first came on, we may have been able to keep the vehicle operational longer. And just because things had been operating correctly up until that point doesn't mean that when the warning signs come, that if they're left unaddressed, the problems wouldn't emerge. And I tell this story simply because it is such a wonderful illustration of how human life operates so many times. Even for those of us who are Christians in particular, when we think about how our faith manifests itself. You see, many times we seem to be ignorant, don't we, to when things are not going well in our lives, especially if we've been in this faith walk for many, many years. To other people, even maybe to ourselves on the surface, it can look like things are going well. It can even look like that to those who are closest to us. But internally, there are sometimes warning signals that come on that show us that there are some shifts that have happened subtly and slowly in our hearts that are problematic and will become more problematic if we don't address them. Why this is particularly hard for Christians to pick up when it comes to our faith is, during this time, I find that a lot of us, we still love Jesus. We're all doing the church thing. We might be doing all the right Christian stuff. We're worshiping, we're praying, we're going to groups, we're shaking hands, we're tithing, we're singing, we're doing all the right Christian stuff. But underneath the surface, there's something that's off, something that needs to be addressed. Well, when I look at the story that was presented for us just a moment ago from Luke chapter 9, when it looks at the story of the disciples, the Jesus disciples, and the face that what they have to face in the passage that we just read, I see something that is so transferable to so many of us in our lives. These disciples, by the time this story is written, had already been with Jesus almost for 3 years to this point. So even though it's in the first half of the book of Luke, by this point in the story, they've been with him for quite a while. They've seen him do a great amount of work, teach like no one else, perform miracles. They've heard him to take up their cross. They don't really get what that means. Some of them have even been up to the mountain to see him transfigured. And yet, as the journey makes a shift, as Jesus starts making his way toward Jerusalem, the place of his ultimate destination, the cracks in their discipleship begin to show. And the exterior to others might look just fine. They might look normal to any other religious individual of his time. But internally, Jesus can see that there are problems, and there are problems that need to be addressed pointedly. What are those problems? Well, at its core, I think it's both a misunderstanding of Jesus' person and his mission on earth. His methods, they appear strange to them. Sometimes they're hard to understand. It's why he never seems to be trying to gather crowds throughout the Gospels, does it? In fact, many times he seems to be thinning the herds because instead of crowds, he's looking for commitments, which means Jesus in his teachings is going to correct as much as he's going to affirm. And so much of the correction that he gives revolves around wrong perceptions about his person and what joining his mission really looks like. So here it is. The story we just read from Luke 9 marks a turning point in Jesus' life. As I mentioned just a moment ago, this is the hinge of the gospel story. It's where he starts moving toward Jerusalem and the cross. It's the moment when the tone shifts from wonder to warning, and where his purposes become non-negotiable if you're going to be his disciple. It's as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago when it was written. Because even though we have the advantage of knowing how this story ends, we know about what happens afterwards, we still struggle with the same things that the disciples here struggled with. We live in an age today where discipleship wants Jesus' influence. It just doesn't always want his lordship. It wants the kingdom. It just doesn't always want the king, at least not the sort of king that Jesus reveals here. So in this passage, Jesus is going to expose tendencies. They're like check engine lights for our life within discipleship that, if not addressed, can take us off course from the real thing. And he's going to do it in a series of 3 dialogues. They're very brief. They're almost so short that it's easy for us to read past them and ignore. But the wise observer of the gospel story will notice them as a sort of warning signal in our own discipleship journey and address them. He's going to reveal tendencies that disciples still struggle to grasp today. But as we'll see, Jesus is not playing. His words still need to be our guide in our own discipleship journey if we're really about following him today. So let's look at these tendencies in order. And the first part describes the disciples' tendencies toward pride. What do I mean? Look at the first story. A debate breaks out among the disciples about who among them is the greatest. Who's the best follower? Who's the best disciple? Who's the one who's got it really figured out? who's Jesus most impressed with? And it shouldn't be that surprising since human nature tends to have us measure us up against one another, don't we? I mean, look at the nature of our lives. So much of our lives is based around competition. Even when it seems innocent, aren't we constantly looking to see who's achieved the most, who's the best? We give out awards all the time for the top this and the top that in school and in work and in sporting environments. It's all around us. And hear me, it's not all bad either until it bleeds into our discipleship. In this story, it appears especially amazing because it comes right after, literally days after some of them had been to the mountaintop with Jesus and seen him transfigured before their very eyes. They saw Jesus in his glorified state. This is as close to heaven as any mortal is going to be able to see. The perspective it gives should be causing them to feel so petty about these arguments, to look at their lives as so small in comparison with one who is so grand. And what is it that happens to us where we originally come to Jesus Christ, as many of us have, just raw and broken before him? We're so humbled, we're so honored to be forgiven, to be in his presence. And God is just, in these moments, so big, and we're so unworthy, but after a while, we get a little bit fat and sassy, don't we? We start thinking, you know what? I'm something special. I may not be the best disciple, but I'm pretty darn good. Jesus is lucky to have someone like me as his follower. Consider the difference between dogs and cats for a minute. The master comes home and pets his dog. The dog has literally been waiting for him all day. And the dog comes up to him and he wags his tail and he looks up and he thinks, wow, he must be God. Then the master goes and he sits down on his couch and the cat comes and curls up on his lap and starts doing that claw thing that's so annoying. Eventually, as you're petting the cat, it falls asleep. And the cat goes, wow, I must be God. That's the difference between cats and dogs, by the way. Cats don't really care about you. We begin our lives like dogs. He's the master. He's great. He's awesome. Wow. But then this feline theology kind of creeps into our own personal walk, and we start thinking, I'm special. I need a position of greatness. So what Jesus does when the disciples start to emulate this is he's going to correct that view. And the way he does it is so fascinating. He takes a little child and he places it right in front of them. Now, the idea of a little child in this story is so critical for our understanding because in Jesus' day, many of the great religious leaders taught that any time spent with a little child, especially if you're someone who was studying theology, studying the nature of God, was considered a waste of time. Can you imagine that? And Jesus was showing, you guys think you're so great, but real greatness is determined by how you treat the weakness. In my kingdom, if you're going to be really great, these are the people who will concern you the most. You hear him say it all throughout the Gospels. Those who consider them first shall be last. That sort of pride has no part of his discipleship. But another tendency starts to warp our understanding of discipleship. And the second one we look at that he addresses here is their tendency toward tribalism. Look at verse 49 again. John said to Jesus, Master, we saw someone casting out demons in your name, and we forbade him because he doesn't follow us. It's a strange story. There's this evidently itinerant Jewish exorcist. He's somehow using the name of Jesus, and power is being released. It seems to be effective. And don't ask me to explain it all because we're given so very little information in this story about how it works. But when the apostles see it as they're walking by, they're bummed out. Let me interpret for you what they're saying here. Jesus, that guy, he doesn't go to our church. You can imagine John is probably looking for approval here. Attaboy, John, let's keep it in the family, right? But instead, what does Jesus do? He works to dismantle it. and he exposes what is tribalism disguised as devotion. And what he says instead is, whoever is not against you is for you. And isn't it true, friends, that we so often get protective about our beliefs and our positions in life? Now, don't get me wrong here for a second. You should have beliefs. You should know what you believe. You should have positions that you understand and that you interpret in life. But I think it can also be very, very easy to become tunnel visioned and think we are the ones, we have the edge. No one has it figured out quite like we do. Now notice the subtle danger here. John's concern is not that demons are being cast out of a man, that a man is being liberated in the name of Jesus. His concern is that someone else is the one who's doing it. I call it kingdom insecurity, and it's a little too active in many of our churches even today. And you know what? I'm just going to put all the cards on the table here. The older I get, the less I care about denominational distinctions between evangelicals. We're Mennonites here, and I just want to say this. I like Mennonites. I'm proud to be Mennonite. I think we have really solid, good theology here. But you know what I care about more? I care about Jesus. Bottom line, hard stop. And if you consider yourself a sincere follower of Jesus, and I'm talking about the kind of person who's died to self, kingdom-minded, Jesus is the only way, I take the Bible very seriously kind of person. I don't really care what denomination you care for. In my eyes, you are my brother and you are my sister. And here's the warning for us, is when our identity is rooted more around a group, a denomination, a style of movement, instead of the heart of Jesus, we end up protecting our brand rather than building up the body. The church is already too fragmented in a world. Protestant versus Catholic, Reformed versus Charismatic, online wars, fighting over minor theological points. But I think the word Jesus might have for his church today, especially for those of us who are shifting into this subtle tendency toward tribalism, is look, if they're not against us, why are you? So the question can't be, are they one of us? It's, are they with Jesus? Earlier this year, I was traveling into the UK, and I was able to go to this midweek worship service in London in a historic old Anglican church called Holy Trinity. It was really good for me because if I'm being really honest with you, if I'm being a little transparent, I have my critiques about the Anglican church right now. I really do. But you know what? I went to this service, and I saw 1,500 20 or 30-somethings pack it out on a random Thursday night, and they just poured out their hearts to Jesus for almost 2 hours. It was awesome. It was encouraging. And in cities like London, it's what's so desperately needed. I don't care about the denomination. And in our time, we so easily slip into rivalry, comparison, and suspicion. And that's what makes this word of Jesus so deeply relevant. So I hope that you will join with me in celebrating what our Baptist brothers are doing. And I hope you'll also join me in celebrating what our Pentecostal ones are doing with and for the person of Jesus. Because even though I love the circle that we're in here, the kingdom of God has a circle that is so, so much bigger. And finally, there's a third tendency that can twist our discipleship, and it's found in the story that describes the disciples' tendency toward power. And one of the hardest things for people to handle in life is power. So I'm 17 years old, and I have my first serious girlfriend. Her family is in the midst of a move. They're going from their house in the city to a house in the countryside. And because I really like this girl, I want so desperately to impress her. So I volunteer my whole weekend to help her move. More than that, I employed one of my friends with muscle to help us move, but he also had a muscle vehicle. He had a Ford Bronco, and I'm not talking about one of those newer models. I'm talking about the old ones that guzzled gas. These things were powerful. And when we went to pick up our first load of boxes from the old place and transport to the new one, my girlfriend, she's already at the new house. She's on the patio. She's unloading the boxes. She's getting things settled in. And as we get closer and closer to the house, I look over to my friend, and I'm really desperate to make a first good impression. And I say, hey, you know, she's never seen me behind the wheel of a car. Would you let me be the one to pull in to the driveway and back up that stuff, just so it looks like I'm the impressive one. And he goes, the reason, Chris, no one has seen you behind the wheel of a car is because you don't yet have your driver's license. And I said, yeah, but how hard can it be? I've watched all the TV shows. I mean, I saw all the Dukes of Hazzards, reruns. And against his better judgment, he actually allowed me to. So we get to the street, and again, these are old country roads. And so we get to the road before the driveway, and we switch spots. And we start slowly going down that road as we're getting ready to pull in. And I can already tell that his advice is so stupid because I've got this. Like, it is so easy to drive. And this isn't the highway. This isn't a main road. This is an old country road. I'm like, I got this. So here we go, and we come in. And we pull into the driveway. There's this big area where we can kind of make a big circle and back in. And I start to make it, but in my effort, I've got like the adrenaline because she's watching me. Her family's out there unloading boxes. And as I turn the steering wheel, I hit the gas just a little too hard. And we go backwards faster than I intend to. And I overcompensate trying to turn the wheel the other way. And the American dream of the white picket fence, well, I blasted right through that white picket fence. And the only reason we didn't slam right into the back of the car or the house is because my friend yelled to me, Chris, slam on the brake. You want to know what the worst part of this story was? They weren't even mad with me because my friend popped out of the car laughing, and he told them about the conversation we'd had just a few minutes later, and everyone sat around the circle laughing at me. So my desperate attempt to leave an impression sure did, but it wasn't the one I was looking to do. And there's such a temptation in power, isn't there, friends? But the truth is that when it's handled and handled inappropriately, for a lot of people, they can take a little power and use it in ways it was never meant to be. And what it can cause is a sort of disaster that will take over in areas that we have no business exercising it in. And this is where that temptation for the disciples is already in Jesus' entourage. It comes in the form of a little power trip. Jesus starts his journey to Jerusalem, a journey that will take him right through the central territory of Samaria, a place where Jews had long-standing competition with their people. And these people choose not to welcome Jesus as he's coming through. Samaritans didn't worship in Jerusalem. They didn't like anyone who did. They had a different place where you worship. So if you're coming through and they hear word, as much as he wants to prepare provisions for them along the way, that they're headed to Jerusalem to worship, the other place, the place of competition, well, their mindset is you can keep on moving. It's rude, it's insulting, and James and John, they want to do something about it. They hear Jesus talk about a kingdom he's about to establish, and you know what they think? Well, Jesus just said about this other guy, if they're not against us, they're for us. Well, these people are certainly against us, and kings need to exercise their power. They need to show their strength, and Jesus is like one of these Old Testament prophets, so let's get Old Testament on these Samaritans and watch them burn. And here's the funny thing about their perspective. No, Samaria didn't receive him, but where exactly in the Gospels do you find that people received Jesus? Galilee didn't. Judea kicked him out. The Gadarenes didn't bring him in. People expelled him everywhere he went. But when it's these enemies of ours, James and John decide, enough is enough. Let's give these Samaritans a taste of the wrath of God. Have you ever wanted God in a moment of honesty to rise up and bring judgment from heaven on the people who've offended you? Now, we don't want to always admit that out loud, but in a world that has so much injustice, has so many issues, isn't it true that the way of the cross can feel like idealism at best? At some points, we just want God to rise up and deal with his enemies because they deserve it. And here's the sobering truth of this story. It is possible for you and I to be zealous for Jesus and completely miss his heart. Jesus did not entertain this line of thinking. He did not even affirm them for their intentions. The Bible simply says that Jesus rebuked them. He did not come to destroy lives. He came to save them. And the idea would have created a real tension within the minds of the disciples. But yet, if we're being honest with ourselves, that same tension exists today. Culture wars are everywhere. It is hard for Christians to navigate, especially when people misrepresent and misconstrue who we are. So it's so easy for us to confuse zeal with love. And in many cases, it's because of the admiration we have of Jesus. I mean, we really believe in the gospel. We believe in his lordship. But what can subtly happen if we are not careful is out of that zeal to think that Jesus needs our defense of his person by any means necessary. But Jesus' chief aim in calling you as his disciples is not admiration, it's rather imitation. When I was a kid, we had these bracelets, and we laugh at them now, called WWJD. Some of you grew up and you know exactly what I'm talking about, the bracelets, the t-shirts. We laugh at them now, but the reason why I think they were so popular and so effective for so long is because really when you look at discipleship, when you boil it right down, isn't there so much truth to that statement? It captures what genuine discipleship looks like. It's not about performance. It's about following and emulating our great Lord and God. Jesus is one of the most famous people in the world today. He's admired by almost everyone, but Jesus is not looking for admirers. He's looking for apprentices. And the invitation remains. He's calling disciples today to follow him. But know, if you do, his face is set toward Jerusalem. And yes, there's a throne in Jerusalem, in that city, but that's not what he's going for. He's going to the cross. He's going to embrace it. It's the way of self-sacrificial love. That's the way of Jesus. Here's the question for you today. For those of you who say, I'm a follower, I'm a disciple of Jesus, what direction is your face set toward? Have you set it toward power, toward tribalism, applause, self-preservation, or have you, like Jesus today, set your face toward Jerusalem, toward the place of sacrifice and surrender? I am so, so grateful that we follow a Savior who chose the way of surrender and the way of sacrifice so that we could receive